a gentleman called Chris Cabba.
Yes.
And another gentleman called Peter, I put Peter Blake down here, Peter Lynch as well. So Chris Cabba was a guy who was shot by a policeman in London, and there's been a trial that's been going on for a while now. But I think what's been quite interesting is that the reaction of the media, and at the same time as Chris Cabba died, the day that Chris Cabba, the policeman, was let off,
was found not guilty.
Not guilty, sorry, was let off. I'm as bad as the BBC. Found not guilty was the day that Peter Lynch died in prison.
Yeah.
Peter Lynch
suspected suicide.
Peter Lynch was a man who was the last video was him showing praying before a camera, saying, you know, what are you doing or whatever around the Southport protests. Basically, he was arrested, even though he didn't commit any violence or whatever, and died in prison within a few weeks of basically sentenced to death as a political prisoner. A horrific thing, but it happened to be reported on the same day as Chris Cabba, who was a black criminal, an extreme black criminal. The day before he was shot, he'd shot a man
in a nightclub
in the legs, and then shot him again outside the nightclub as he lay on the ground. And he was trying to escape from the police, ramming his car into people when he was shot by armed police. What's been really interesting in here is how the media and how the politicians have reacted to this. So the BBC did a report that they've had to withdraw, I think, since then, saying that black people in London have been traumatised by the verdict of Chris Cabba. I don't know if you are aware of that.
I did, but do you know where that came from?
No.
That was an interview on the street with one black person who said, oh yeah, that's disgraceful, the black community now are traumatised. Just a random guy on the street said black people are traumatised in London.
That's where it comes from.
And the BBC run with that.
Yeah.
One person.
Yeah. So that's an example. And I think what I'm trying to say here is that this crap runs deep.
Yeah.
You've got the BBC doing that. At the march in London on Saturday, there was a march, they call it the United Kingdom March or something.
Unite the Kingdom.
Unite the Kingdom, the Patriots March, basically. People, Tommy Robinson fans, people who were opposed to Southport rights, people like me and you who would go on. I would certainly go on that march. I just didn't manage to go down there. But basically talking, a lot of them are anti-immigration and
just average people.
Average working.
Who don't know what else to do to voice their concerns. So we're going to London and marching peacefully.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
What else can they do to show people, I'm sick of this?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think there were several tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands.
I heard there was 30,000 on that march and 300 at the counter-demonstration march.
Yeah, so that's interesting. This is what I'm going to talk about. There was a counter demonstration which I understand faded and died fairly early on. But in that counter demonstration, there was a chap called Daniel Kebede. Have you heard of him?
No.
So he's the General Secretary of the National Education Union, one of the biggest teachers' unions. And he got on stage and basically said Tommy Robinson wasn't a victim, and Tommy Robinson by this time has been arrested. But Chris Cabba was a victim of two-tier justice. So this is the leader of the National Education Union, one of the major teaching unions.
Doesn't surprise me. Most of the unions are captured. Most of the unions fully behind the trans ideology, behind race critical theory. The thing with the Cabba thing is they all wanted him to be the English version of George Floyd.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to paint him as.
They've tried to paint him as the English version of George Floyd, who was also a criminal, by the way.
Yeah.
A reprehensible criminal.
Just on Cabba, let me state this. Cabba shouldn't have been shot because he was a London gangster, a violent gangster. That's not enough to shoot the man. When they stopped the car, they had no idea who was driving the car. So it might not have been Chris Cabba. They didn't know who was driving the car. That car was marked for arms. They wanted to pull it over, but they weren't sure who was driving it. The reason why he was shot is not because he was called Chris Cabba, not because he was black, not because he was a gangster, not because he has guns and shot people a day before. He was shot because he was in a 1-ton car ramming police cars trying to escape, and officers were stood around it who could have been run over by him. He was told so many times to stop ramming the cars, hands up, get out of the car, and he kept on ramming cars, putting police officers' lives in danger. That's when he was shot. Has no different. I don't care about his past. I don't care about who he was. In that scenario, the police should shoot someone if their colleagues are in danger and that person is trying to escape.
I think the reaction, it's interesting, the reaction from various groups and various people were clearly trying to escalate this, to fuel to something more than it was about the George Floyd trying to do a BLM moment.
Of course they were.
And here's five...
A lot of money to be made out if you can turn it into a George Floyd moment.
I think there are these kind of interests at heart, and these are examples of 5 of the worst takes on Cabba. Have you heard of the Runnymede Trust?
Yes.
It's a taxpayer-funded racial justice group.
You know Lisa Nandy, the MP?
Yes, I know Andy Spicer, yes.
Well, her dad set it up, from what I can remember.
That's good. That's good knowledge. So they were fuming on Twitter, asking for real justice, families affected by racist state violence. The lack of police accountability perpetuates cycles. Our thoughts and solidarity with Chris's loved ones. And that's what they said initially. Then once the facts came out, they had to add, the police officer was subjected to a full independent investigation, and a criminal trial found Martin Blake not guilty by a jury of peers. So they had to kind of immediately retract. Black Lives Matter, your favourite organisation, they urged supporters to gather outside London's Old Bailey on Monday night.
Yeah, I saw the pictures.
And then said the police killed Chris Cabba, basically. We find them guilty of systemic racism and violence, and that is before all the stuff came out about his criminal record, basically. They've not then said anything. Sadiq Khan described the killing of Cabba as a young life cut short, adding in 2020 he understood the grave concerns and impacts of Chris's death on black Londoners across our city and the anger, pain and fear it caused, basically.
Well, what it's done to black Londoners has made London a bit safer for them. That's what it's done.
Yes. So all these people were saying these things before it came out what a horrific criminal this guy was, basically. Jeremy Corbin posted a picture of himself on a march for Cabba, and he said, "We cannot live the pain felt by his family, but we can support them by demanding #justice for Chris Cabba. He's been curiously quiet since the retail details of Cabba came out, basically." Will he admit he's wrong?
No.
And finally, Belle Ribeiro added, Labour MP for Clapham and Brixton has spent years lamenting the events that led to Cabba's death and was quick to point the finger at the police. But when the newly released criminal record came out, and sorry for clarity for our listeners, his criminal record has been suppressed all the way through the trial. No details have been given out until after the trial. So this information then came to afterwards. Once his newly released criminal record, she toned down her rhetoric. Whilst police officers undeniably have a difficult job and work under exceptional pressures, this trial shows that nobody is above the law. So I think there's interesting things here. One is that these people were quick to condemn the police, to try and stoke up anger, violence and everything else around this particular death. Then clearly either went quiet or modified afterwards. But I haven't heard anything like this rhetoric, this speech around the death of Peter Lynch. And I don't know if you have or are aware of it.
It's because there isn't any. Even Reform UK have not discussed Peter Lynch.
And why is that, Nick?
Because it's connected to the Southport riots, it's connected to white, far-right people writing, and Reform are scared stiff of being associated with anything like that.
But nobody else has said it. What happened to the days when we were younger, where lawyers would take up a cause to try and find justice for somebody who'd been wrongly imprisoned?
Most lawyers and most lawyer firms now are woke.
And this is why I despair, though, Nick, because in the past, I remember there were lawyers like, is it Michael Mansell or Michael, the lawyers, human rights lawyers, who when people were arrested incorrectly or imprisoned or whatever, would start a campaign.
Oh, that still happens now.
Yeah.
But not for old white straight men.
Yeah.
People like Chris Cabba probably got a very good lawyer solicitor on all free of charge and all that. He'll get it, but not an old white man.
Yeah. So this is the bit I find very disheartening. All these people who've been arrested after the Southport riots, white people who've not committed any crime. There's nobody doing justice for Peter Lynch. Maybe there is a Justice for Peter Lynch logo, I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's not a campaign, there's not a fundraiser, there's not...
No one on the streets, is there?
No.
No one's posting white squares on Instagram
Yes.
for Peter Lynch.
Yes.
He's forgotten about, he'll be forgotten about. Most of the people in the country have never heard his name.
Yeah.
But most of the people in the country have heard the name George Floyd.
Yeah.
That says it all.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers, I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.